just because you have an understanding of the Bible in your head doesn't necessarily mean that you have Jesus in your heart.
Get right, get inside, get hungry, I've got appetite. Everlasting water, never get thirsty. To disputed lands, take a journey.
You are listening to Chad Schaefer on Disputed Lands.
Hello, everybody, and welcome again and welcome back. If you've been watching our marathon interviews, this is yet another hour in the series of this interviews, all for the purpose, one purpose, that's to raise money for Josh and Christina Peck. If you haven't seen the previous interviews, I'll just briefly let you know that we are raising money. As many of you know, Josh and Christina's son, Nathan, was diagnosed with leukemia about a year ago. And even with insurance, as you might well understand, the medical bills can stack up. With all that Josh and Christina have done and have given to us, this is just a small way, an opportunity for all of us to show our love and appreciation for our fellow brother and sister in a time of need. What you will need to do is you will need to go to that website that's scrolling across the bottom of the screen right now. That's dailyrenegade.com. Go to dailyrenegade.com. You'll want to subscribe if you can. Get your monthly subscription if you haven't done so already. But more importantly, and for this hour, you want to find the donate button. Go to that, click the donate. You can give $1, you can give $5, you can give $100, or you can give as much as you are capable of giving. We have not set a cap or a target on this, because if I do that, you guys would meet it and then you would stop. We want to exceed anything that we could have thought of or planned for. So go and do that. If you do not want to donate directly, if you want to remain anonymous, there is going to be a GoFundMe link below this video. I believe through GoFundMe, you can give anonymously. However, remember, if you give that way, GoFundMe is going to take their cut. So not all of your donation will go to Josh and Christina. The best way to get all of your money to them is to go to that dailyrenegade.com. All right. And without further ado, I'm going to bring up my new friend and special guest at this hour, Lisa Haven. Lisa Haven, welcome to Disputed Lands on Take on the World TV. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm truly excited to be here as well.
Well, we're happy to have you. I tell you, one of the blessings of knowing Josh and Christina Peck is being introduced and coming across and acquainted with all of their friends. I've just been truly blown away by the number of people who have been affected or worked with or spoken at conferences with and become friends with the Pecks. And you're one of them. You're one of them that he had on his list for your boldness. And with that, for my audience, we would like to get to know you a little bit better, Lisa. Can you tell me just a little bit of maybe your background, any kind of testimony that you want to give? And then I'll ask you questions along that way, and then we'll kind of get into some of the topics we'll discuss here.
Yeah, I guess a shorter version of my testimony is I grew up in a Christian household. My dad was a really hardcore Christian, went to church every day. And of course, being taught that in your youth, it's like, well, what else do I know is real or false? So, it's like those kind of things creep in your head when you're in a young age, because if this is all I know, then how is it right? Which is the biggest question that I struggled with as, someone growing up within the church, being surrounded by the church. And my mom was morally supportive of my dad. She's not the full Christian, and she is now. Obviously, she's come a long way. But when I was younger, she was just like, yeah, do what you do. It's good. You go to church. You go, I stay home. So, I had that little influence of both. And when I hit my college years, kind of had that crisis. I'm not going to believe in God unless I know everything else is false. Like, we're going to look up this thing. So I had a crisis, so to speak, of where, you're going to prove to me who you are, God, or I'm not going to believe who you are. And that was kind of where I was at with the Lord. And I literally asked him, well, you wrote on the wall, I want to see writing on the wall for me. I want to see you turn water into wine. I want to see physical evidence. And I had this battle over and over and over. It went on for months. I actually bought all these archaeological books, factual books, creation versus evolution versus, I mean, you name it, because I'm a researcher. Obviously, that's what I do now. But I had everything. And then I had the moment with the Lord where one time I was, sitting in there and, I call it my prayer closet, because I would literally go in the closet. And I'm not joking. This is how stubborn I was. And I would go in the closet and I would wait for an hour. Ask, Lord, I want to see something. And I'd sit there and after, like, I don't know, I think this happened, went on for 2 months. And I'm like, I'm done, Lord. I'm mad at you. And you know what? I said, and I just got to that point where I've had all the evidence, in the books that I was reading. So I knew already. And then I kind of had that crisis of belief. And, Hebrews 11:6 is a big scripture for me. Believe in what you can't see, basically. He who, the man who has said, he wanted the Lord to heal his son and help my unbelief was my biggest battle.
One of my favorite.
Yeah.
Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. Yes.
Yes. So that's kind of my life scripture. That's what I revolve around. And at that moment where I said, okay, Lord, I'll believe even if there is no factual evidence. And that's when he put that scripture in my mind. And then I opened the Bible to that actual scripture, not knowing at the time what it had said,
Wow.
and I'm like, okay, I get it. And then from there, me and the Lord have had our own battles. But so that's kind of the simple version of it, of how I came to the Lord and all of that. So, yeah.
So going from there to doing what you do now, how long ago was it that you began either putting out videos or interviews and decided to say, you know what, I can't just sit on the sidelines. I've got to be active about what I see happening around me and in the world. How long ago did that happen?
Well, I would say a lot of that started in my youth, because my dad was really into Bible prophecy, end times, what's happening. I mean, conspiracies, Nephilim, giants, UFO. So I knew about some of this growing up. Yes, which is not like your normal kid, I guess. Right.
Yeah, that's unusual.
It is unusual. And so I kind of had a heart for it. But growing up, I went to college for like architectural stuff, started my own business in architecture. Then 2008 happened. That went crashing down, homeschooled my kids, and just kind of took that avenue. And when I was homeschooling, I got this itch where, like, Lord, I want to do something for you. And so I started writing a blog and just kind of putting whatever I wanted. I didn't even advertise. I didn't put it out there. I just wrote what I wanted and said what I wanted. And it usually revolved around, the reality of Christ, or Bible prophecy, or things that were happening politically. It was anything that I knew about, because I'm a big researcher, and a lot of what I knew prior to that, I didn't feel like I could get out to people. For example, before I started, or like when I was homeschooling my kids, I actually had a Bible study with like 1,000 women at our church. I was the women's ministry, kind of one of the main people in the women's ministry. I was the leader of the Bible studies. I wrote the Bible studies. And so a lot of the times, this is after the architecture job, I felt like being in the church, I want to say more, but I can't. And so I wanted to discuss politics. I wanted to say, support Christianity, support Christian candidates. I wanted to say, well, we know about giants and Nephilim and about Bible prophecy, but you can't say it. You can't say it. And so eventually the Lord moved me out of that. I would never have left on my own by moving me to another city. I had to move out of the city because of my husband's job. And so we moved. Anyway, that's when I started writing online, because I was getting bored, but also homeschooling. And as my kids got older and more self-reliant on it, I told the Lord, okay, I got to do something else. I'm going to be a nurse. And he's like, no, you're not. I'm like, I just got this crazy hair. Well, I need to do something, Lord. I don't make any money. Like, I'm going to be a nurse. So knowing the Lord told me no, right? I told the Lord, keyword. It's mission work, God. You want this. Trust me. And so I went and took the test and was going to go back to nursing and just get it done, and bought my books. Okay. I'm a very stubborn person. I brought my books home, and the Lord said, I told you not to buy that book. I'm like, well, I told you I was doing this. And so he kept putting it on my heart, and I kept being very stubborn. And then one day the Lord said, okay, you want it? I'll give it to you. But basically in a way that you're not going to like it. You know, I'm like,
Been there.
Oh, okay. And then I was like, I'm so sorry. Okay. I don't like this. I'm mad at you, but I'm not going to do it. And I literally dropped the books, and I was so mad at God, but I was following what he told me to do because he was scared. At that point, I'm like, I know this isn't what the Lord has in mind for me. So why go forward, you know? And when he's basically told me I'm not going to like it. And I'm like, okay. So anyway, 2 weeks after I turned down going to nursing school and had my books and everything, is when I got the call from Before It's News. And basically they wanted to bring me on as a writer. And then that's when YouTube started happening, and I created YouTube, and it was all on my own. I started writing for Before It's News, and that kind of got, you know, me out there. And then they're like, why don't you create a YouTube channel? Okay. You know, I don't know what I'm doing, but I figured it out. And then just from there, it blew up, and I'm like, oh, good thing I never went into nursing, because I would have never have been where I'm at. So that's kind of a longer version, I guess.
Well, no, I can totally sympathize. I also grew up in the church and the church environment. And for me, it was my mother who went to church, and was my dad who didn't go because he was busy with his horses or whatever in my younger years. And it's the same story later on. Now they are both every Sunday, you know, you'll find them in church and together. But it was the same for me growing up, and I had similar in those same years. And then my wake up moment, but it was during the wake up prior to the wake. Oh, it was immediately after the Lord really grabbed my attention. I was serving as a deacon in the church, and we had this position open where our youth minister had left, and they wanted somebody to fill in as a temporary until they could get someone else hired in. And I'm like, well, you know, I have 5 kids. My kids are there. I'm there anyway. You know, maybe this is like capacity I could do. And I was sitting there as I was listening to this. This is during the deacons meeting. So, well, maybe I can put my hat in the ring to maybe fill this. And I got a distinct spiritual, no, you're mine. I have plans for you. You're my son. You are not doing this. No. And it just repeated like 3 times. By the time the 3rd time entered into me, I felt like crawling underneath my chair. I mean, it was just like the Father saying, no, absolutely not. Long story short, you know, here I am today. We're going to talk more about what you do, but I can empathize, sympathize, understand your story there so well. It's uncanny and kind of the similar things. The Father was really moving in a lot of people, I think, to ruin themselves and their plans and say, hey, I'm going to need you guys here coming up soon. So let's get you ready. And what people need to do right now, not close this recording, but on another screen or perhaps another browser, you need to go to the website that's scrolling across the bottom of your screen right now. It's going to be restrictedrepublic.com. Restrictedrepublic.com. There you will find tons and tons of information where Lisa has done research and background and checked news stories and interviews, so on and so forth. You have months of back-to-back interviews and stuff that you guys can go through, blogs and stuff you can read. But one of the things I was talking to you off air, Lisa, before we came on, was first this coronavirus information. Now, I, like everybody else, saw it start cropping up across my newsfeed, not on TV. I don't watch TV, but across my newsfeed on Facebook, through Twitter, and all of that. I just started seeing this stuff pop up. But it did not take, and you and I were talking, it seems like that same day, I also started seeing a lot of other contradictory information. It seemed like it was almost immediately that false stories or spam stories started cropping up. Now, I don't know about you, Lisa, but when I see stories pop up, they don't get a lot of traction. They're just news pieces here or there. maybe one or two people talk about it, but it's pretty much the same story, maybe good information, but then it doesn't go anywhere. I'm like, well, that's good information that needs to be shared. But this story, it blew up. Now, when I see a story and then all these other contradictory stories start creeping up, my attention is won over. But there was so much to weed through that I quickly understood it's going to be hard to find the truth in this. So, coronavirus, tell us about it. For those who don't know but anything of headlines, what do we know about this coronavirus?
Well, I mean, I guess we'll start with this. Biblically speaking, the Lord talks about basically an increase in pestilence and famine and all these things that we shall see in the later day. And I think that we're starting to see the birth pang spoken of in biblical prophecy, and coronavirus is absolutely a part of that. And it's not just coronavirus. If you look at the headlines, we've got basically H5N1, H5N8 killing off the birds. It's attacking a lot of our poultry, the swine, our birds. And then we also have the African swine fever that's killing a lot of the pigs. So this is adding as well to the Bible prophecy, and not to mention some other pandemics, if you will, or things that we need to keep an eye on, like the swine flu, which is also out and about now again and has raised this ugly head. We've heard everything from bubonic plague to right now, the most current is obviously the coronavirus. So a lot of the times we've got the coronavirus hitting, and I think that's the most crucial, right? But we've also got a slew of other things affecting, not to mention the locusts, which I'm sure you've talked about. We have those knocking out parts of our crops. So we're literally not only getting hit by this pandemic that's going to affect us economically, but we've also got other stuff hitting from multiple directions affecting our food supply. So that's why I say, a lot of this surrounds, I think, what the Bible talked about in biblical prophecy is those birth pangs. And I do see them increasing. So, but as far as the coronavirus is concerned, I believe it was leaked out of a lab. This is something that I talked about early on. It wasn't from some marketplace. This is basically a fact now that the mainstream media is finally admitting. I admitted this and talked about it a month and a half ago, but they've got that level 4 bio lab there. And a lot of people believe that it came out of there. Now, what we don't know is whether it was accidental.
Level 4 biolab, where?
In Wuhan. It's gosh, why am I blanking on the name? If you Google like Wuhan biolab, it'll come virology. Wuhan virology. That's what it's called. Biolab, the virology lab. But basically the lab is there, and it's a couple, I think, like 10-minute drive from the market. But now even New York Post is admitting that we believe it's from the lab, even the White House. And these are all facts. The White House has investigated it and looked into it and still is looking into it. The senator from Arkansas, Senator Cotton, he's also brought information on this. So now it's public knowledge and public news. Where everybody is making conspiracies is, well, is it accidental? Was it on purpose? Is it a bioweapon? That kind of thing. That we don't know. So we know where it came from. And we also know, based off of, I guess, the actual structure of coronavirus, that it was made in a lab. Like it was, what's inside of that thing cannot be engineered by nature. And there's a lot of good videos on this I've seen on multiple locations, InfoWars and other places that's kind of got some information on that. But it's interesting seeing, leading scientists and people who study the structures of these things come out and start making statements, because China did say, okay, here's the building blocks. Here's what we have. And they actually opened that to the public, which is a shocker. But what we do know is they're lying about the numbers. Everybody pretty much agrees. So that's one thing where everybody agrees, because if you go back to SARS and some of the other viruses that came out of China, they all lied. It came out after the fact that they lied. But even now, they've actually changed the way that they've tallied the coronavirus. Like, how many people do we have that have the virus? Well, one day they want to tally it based off of confirmed cases. The next day they want to base it off of confirmed cases and people who have pneumonia-like symptoms. Then they change it the following day. And so their numbers go up and then down and then up and then down. So we're not getting a consistent pattern here. And the only reason that you're doing that is if you're trying to hide information. So when we look at the coronavirus, that's the other fact we know. The information, the statistics are not correct. My hypothesis, this is not a fact, is it could be, 3 times higher than the numbers if we base that off of what China lied about in the past. They were usually about triple what they said. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. And I have 2 questions going back to things you've said. So I saw reports when you were talking about, we know that this virus is a man-made. It's a manufactured. It's not a naturally occurring virus. We know that things were added to it. Now, I'd seen reports where supposedly, and I don't know how quickly this could have happened, where a couple of physicians, doctors, PhDs, whoever, virologists had looked at it and said that the protein markers in this looked like it was engineered from HIV. Where the way that HIV works in its ability to progenerate itself and attach to and live, markers, whatever those are within this virus, have been put in there to make it more virulent. It's a hard word to say when you're trying to say it quickly, to make it more susceptible to being passed along. So is that true? Is that part of the whitewash? Do you know anything about that?
I believe it to be true. Like,
Okay.
and I'm not a virologist, so
Right.
all I could look at, and there's been multiple data on it. Now, I even know, coming out of, and I've, you got to read the Communist Mouthpiece articles and the regular,
Right.
you got to read a whole slew. So this information that they actually have been using. And the reason I believe it to be true is not only because we have scientists telling us this is what's in it, this is what we have, and not one scientist, we're talking multiple here.
So there's been multiple who have verified and confirmed that. Okay.
Two that I know of, for
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
And the other thing is on the Communist Mouthpiece, it was either the Global Times of China or something. I forget the global one. It's a Communist Mouthpiece paper, or China Morning Post. One of them said that they actually were curing people with HIV drugs. And so if that's the case, or basically not necessarily curing, but helping people overcome the symptoms to where their bodies cure themselves. And so if that's the case, then absolutely, So we've got virologists, scientists coming out saying this information. And then we have from the Communist Mouthpiece, of all things, which is very hard to trust any information coming out of them, but they actually admitted to that. I've also seen admissions that it was being aided along with oxygen therapy, and and so there's just so much disinformation and information.
Right.
It's hard to follow the full path. But, when you get things from multiple sources, I tend to take them a little more stronger. And so that's kind of what we got to look at. And even, the numbers could even be higher than the triple number that I give, because we've had people out of Wuhan talking about, and I've shared it on my channel, like the crematoriums, right? There was a crematorius there who said, we're burning like 100 bodies a day. And then they brought in 40 more incinerators, 40 more. What do you need so many for? And they're saying, well, for animal carcasses and for the supplies. Well, why are the animals dying? And then we get the report out, well, it's because of the disinfectant we're spraying. So it's just like, okay, we got to, slowly piece these things together to get an overall picture. But so much is happening. People are risking their lives. You've seen the videos, people falling over, dying. And so we know right now, even, I think we'll get better statistics when this starts happening in other countries. We could get maybe with what's going on in Italy, you have 12 cities at the making of this video. It'll probably change, but cities quarantined. So, as it starts spreading around in other countries, we'll have more factual data. Unfortunately, the Communist Party is not exactly truthful.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Maybe you know the answer, and I don't. Is diagnosis a proclamation of death? I mean, to get this virus, is it a death sentence, or is it like other viruses that is being overcome by folks who become contagious with this?
No, people are overcoming it.
Okay.
That would be misinformation. People that are sharing
Okay.
saying you get this and you die, that's misinformation. It's just not true.
Okay.
We know this to be fact because I've been reading a lot of Epic Times articles, and I don't know if you know Epic Times. I've read their stuff off and on, and most of it has been pretty good. But they get people on from China and they tell stories of the virus. There are people who have overcome the virus, and we can just look at some of the situations on the cruises. There's already been recoveries and whatnot.
Okay.
So that's something that I would say it's overcomable. Now, what I don't know for sure is it just affecting the elderly and the really, really young, like they say? Well, I don't know. That's what I don't know. What I do know is it likely, like every other virus, it always affects the young and the elderly more. That's pretty much across the board, your flus, your coronaviruses. However, there have already been cases and reports of people in their 30s and 20s and 40s, dying to the virus. So it can hit anyone. I think it would depend on, each immune system. And that's why I encourage people, make sure you build up your immunity, make sure you're taking supplements. I think that's one of our best attacks to it is to keep yourself healthy, eat well, exercise, those kinds of things.
Also, a part in going along to this, and one of the questions that our audience may have too is not long after we started hearing about, which, I mean, it's expected. I mean, it's impossible, and they know it. They do war gaming and talking about the spread of different viruses for pandemics to kind of look into prophecy or look into the future. I'm missing the word. Look into where and how it's going to spread, how quickly it can spread. But along those lines, I saw a report saying that the United States, which I'm sure that they have a plan in place for this kind of a thing, that designated certain areas as quarantine zones. You had like 10 or 12 throughout the United States. Is there any truth to those being prepped and prepared? Do we know that was in fact happening?
Yeah,
to these
you
different
can.
quarantine zones?
I encourage people, go to Google, hit CDC and quarantine,
Okay.
and it'll bring up the CDC website, and you can read it right there. It says they have 20 quarantine facilities and designated areas. That's a fact, So they've existed even before the coronavirus. Right. So This is something that has always been as a preventative measure, just in case. This is in every country across the board.
Sure.
But people can go on to the CDC website and see that. Are they preparing? Yeah. Because of what's going on right now. In fact, they're preparing not only those facilities, which are, they've got a level of protection, but in addition to that, the military came out and was preparing, I think, 11 different areas for quarantine victims currently. So if because I don't think the CDCs are fully ready to go, but I think they're designated and they can get them up and running pretty quick, right? But the military ones, they had to set aside certain 11 facilities, which they did. So these are accepting people that are coming in from like your Diamond Princess cruise from other countries. And right now, this is not fake news. At the making of this video, see, it's hard if I know it's going to go a little much in the future, but
yeah, that's okay.
Thousands of people are under quarantine already. So
really?
It's just, yeah, definitely. So it's just, you've got that too. And that's going to happen under any, pandemic situation. So,
well, you may or may not. Do you know anybody currently under quarantine? I mean, we're so interconnected anymore. It seems like it's not hard to be related to or know somebody. Do you know of anybody that's been in that quarantine or spoken with anybody who has family in quarantine right now to find out exactly what that's been like for them?
Well, no, but the quarantine, okay, that I'm talking about is it goes in two different ways. Sometimes they'll take you to a facility if you're coming in directly from somewhere, and
Right.
other times they say you're not allowed to leave your house. It's a self-quarantine.
Okay.
The problem is the United States isn't actually testing all these people. They're just saying quarantine and make sure you don't show any symptoms, and then we're good. So that's the other interesting part, because you would think, okay, if you've been around a person and a victim, you might as well get tested, but we're not really doing that. And if you go to the CDC website, again, facts information, you can look up whatever the current number of tests are. They'll tell you on their website of how many people they've tested. So whenever you're looking, make sure you go there and you can see on the CDC site, well, we've tested 400 or 500 or how many ever. And what I will say is the amount of tests does not equal those under self-quarantine.
Part of that, I did read a little bit in regards to that too. I think part of the reason that was being given, at least in the article I read, and I can't even tell you where I read it, was it was actually in relation to China, but it would make sense here too, is that they simply do lack the sheer volume or quantity of tests that are actual tests that they need to actually test people for this virus. They simply don't exist, or they can't be manufactured that quick to actually do the actual test to test for this particular virus. Have you heard that as well?
I've heard that. And yes, they're having that problem in China because there is a mass amount of people.
Sure.
But however, in South Korea, you had your blow up, but they just so happen to be testing tons of people in South Korea. So,
Really?
you know, the question is, where are you getting the test?
Interesting.
these
Yeah,
are
I have
all
not heard
things
of it.
yeah, these are all things you look at. Well, if they're testing their people in mass just fine, obviously there's a lot less in South Korea, but South Korea has currently tested more than the United States has, you know, as far as tests.
Well,
So,
sure. I mean, logistically, they are a lot closer, but like you said, that raises the question: how are they testing them?
yeah. So it has
Interesting.
to be asked here too. So, I mean, maybe we're sending them off to China. Great. They need them right now. But what if we need them? I guess. So you do have that problem, obviously, but that's where we're at. And that could embolden the issue in the future.
Right. Well, that's where I'm going to try to switch gears here. I'm going to ask you another question to kind of get your brain going. But just to those who are listening, whether this airs actually a month or even 2 months from when we record this, if you want to stay on top of it, I'm just glancing at her website right now with her videos that is scrolling across the bottom of your page, and there's probably at least half a dozen just at a glance videos where it's talking about this, bringing you information. She has links where she's to the actual interviews, like you were talking about of people in China there. So if you want to stay current, up to date with information, you know, somebody is researching, looking into diligently. You asked me that question. I don't know if you've seen it. Well, that's just the point, Lisa. I'm doing what I do. I'm looking at a bunch of, I'm listening to a bunch of different people. I interview and look at their information. So that's where a lot of my time goes. I simply don't have the time. I got a wife and kids. I simply don't have the time to research and look into this stuff. I rely on people I trust to who that is their passion. That's their ministry to bring us that information. So it's very comforting to know there's someone as diligently as you looking into this information that I can say, okay, I can listen to this. I can trust this information. So coronavirus, I'm going to ask you this question. Aside from that, what information or news that is out there has really intrigued you recently that you're keeping an eye on? I can tell you one that actually has caught my attention, and that's the death of Phil Haney. But you may have other information or news that you had been looking into or reading about recently. What other things should we be aware of right now?
No, that's definitely something with what's going on with Phil Haney. And just another person to add to the Obama Hillary, should I say, death count. And it's just that I think it goes to show the level of cover up from our government. And I think we need to take, what
So
happened.
you don't believe?
Yeah.
You don't believe it was just an accidental?
No.
Or a suicide?
No, that's what they
You
said.
know,
We have Seth Rich, Breitbart, Phil Haney. I mean, we have a whole list of people. And I've had a lot of conversations with Larry Nichols, who is, the former, guy that worked with Hillary and Bill Clinton for a number of years. And he's got lots of, information. But based off of what I've heard from him, based off of the body count, like the death of people, there's always, how do I say, a body count that surrounds every president, right?
yeah.
Technically, but the average count is usually under 5. And we're talking for Clinton and Obama, we're talking over 100 at this point, and it keeps going up. So there's absolutely something going on here without a doubt. And same thing with Jeffrey Epstein. Jeff Epstein did not kill himself. No, I don't believe he did either.
There was recent, along with the Phil Haney thing, and I'm trying to find the tweet now. There was actually a senator or a governor out of Iowa who had mentioned that Phil Haney was not a suicide along with Epstein. This was an actual governor or a senator out of Iowa that had tweeted that. That really caught my attention, that somebody at such a high level would be so bold. And he's a Democrat. That was the second shock. He tweeted out that, hey, this was, here it is, I think. U.S. Congress, Steve King, verified, U.S. Congress, 4th Congressional District of Iowa, tweeted that, let's see if I can, this is exactly what it says. You can go to, I'll put it right here on the screen. You can see him, hold it still enough so it comes into focus there, maybe. It's Steve King, and he said this: Phil Haney was a friend and a patriot. He was a target because of all he knew of Islamic terrorist cover-ups. He ensured his life by archiving data that incriminated the highest levels of the Obama administration. Phil Haney didn't kill himself. R.I.P. Phil. This is 4th Congressional District guy, Steve King, who tweeted this. I was like, whoa, this guy was somebody who is in a place to be in the know. He was a friend of Phil Haney, and he said he ensured the information. I don't know about you, Lisa, but I am so hopeful that information, wherever it was ensured, is where it will be brought to light, as his insurance policy upon, a suicide.
I hope so. I mean, it's like, we just think of what happened to past people, like Michael Hastings. He made the phone call talking about, hey, I've got information, I'm getting this out, and then he dies right after. And again, unusual circumstances. His car just happens to veer into a tree all of its own accord in the middle of downtown, of all places, where I can't remember where he was. Might have been New York or whatever. Yeah, he's actually on the phone, and all of a sudden his car just veers off on its own into a tree. I'm so sure. Yeah, no. And that's the thing. And the massive amount of cover up has exploded and gotten worse over the years. It's like they're getting more bold and in our face. Like, you take Seth Rich. He was robbed, but yet none of his belongings were taken, right? Okay, we're smart enough. Phil Haney, oh yeah, he just shot himself. On
a stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere where he could be found with the gun right there in this seat next to him. Yeah.
So it's just all these things that are in our face obvious. They're starting to rub. And I think this goes along with this next portion here. And that's, I think that's one of the biggest things that we have to pay attention to, because it doesn't stop there. You see, they may, assassinate or take certain people out, but now they're taking it a step further and being bolder by starting to censor what we can say online, what we can do online, our social media reports, our YouTube channel. Like I was told that basically don't be posting about coronavirus on YouTube anymore because they're cracking down on it, which means they hide, they delist, they unmonetize, they don't pay, which is exactly what they have been doing. And so that's been, and which is why I started Restricted Republic. And one reason we have to get the heck off the platform, but it's only a matter of time, I think, before they start attacking the platforms. And they've already removed my name, Other Patriots' name. When you search, some of my information, you can find pieces of stuff, but not some of my biggest things, and it's like, so now they've gone beyond just, killing or killing people that are directly in their path, like Phil Haney, like Mike Hastings, like Breitbart, like Seth Rich, like you name it, right? JFK, right? Now they've gone to the point where they've teamed up with social media giants, and Amazon, Bezos, and Jack Dorsey, and Zuckerberg, and Susan Wojcicki, and the whole Google conglomerate, where they're trying to shut down voices in the name of hate speech. And I get so mad because hate speech isn't a thing. It doesn't exist. It's not real. Hate speech was created by the left as a power to silence their political opposition. That's it. There's no such thing as hate speech. And I think that's one of our biggest enemies today, because if we lose our freedom of speech, well, we've lost a lot, because it's going to be hard to win the masses over if you can't even talk to the masses.
Yeah. In preparation for our interview, of course, you had sent me your website link, which I dutifully clicked on so I could go right to it. But just out of curiosity on my own, I was telling you right before we came on, I just simply searched Lisa Haven. I had actually, I think the exact term I used, Lisa Haven website on Google right now. It may be when this records, it may be unfindable at all, but it was not appearing on the first page of anything. I could see your Twitter handle. I could see links to other videos that you had done with other people. But as far as your website directly to find you, nowhere to be found. It could not be found. So you can test this on your own. So that's why I'm saying right now, folks, it's been scrolling across the screen. You want to bookmark this, because there's a time in the future where you simply, her name probably won't appear like mine on any of the pages. And you will have to know how to get to it. It's right there on restrictedrepublic.com. She has a secondary website, lisahaven.news. That's lisahaven.news. Those two websites you'll want to bookmark. The news one is more of the blogs and the articles and things of that nature. The videos you will find on the other one. And Lisa, I think you told me you're gradually moving more and more over to this website, the restrictedrepublic.com website. So that's the principal one. That's why the one we're emphasizing, but she does have the other one as well. Bookmark them both. You never know which one, of us, if, we'd say if, but when they move to that level. And while we're pausing here, before I'll let you continue on, again, reminder, the whole purpose of these marathon interviews is so that you can go to thedailyrenegade.com. If you've already forgotten, go to dailyrenegade.com. Get it pulled up on a second tab. You'll want to go there and donate as well. So I had asked you that question. We've talked, Lisa, about Phil Haney a little bit, but I'm sure that cropped on your radar. But are there other things that you've been researching or looking into that you think all of us who are watching should be aware of or know about, or any changes or things going on? What hit your radar?
No, there's a lot on the radar. The election is obviously another one of those. And the rise of Bernie Sanders. It's, Bernie Sanders, AOC, Anaya Presley, Ilhan Omar, and Rashid Tlaib. These are all Justice Democrats. And I want to encourage everybody, look up Justice Democrats. This is led basically by the Young Turks guy. He has been supporting and kind of the foundation on that. And these are all people who push communism. And you see, what I want to encourage is we need to wake up to communism, and not so much our generation and over, but it's the younger generation that is literally being manipulated to think that this is good. And and we got to start throwing it out this way. Look, conservatives have never had to change their name. We've just been conservatives. Libertarians never had to change their name, just been libertarians. The only one that's had to change to multiple names is communism. It went from communism to socialism to progressivism. So let's change the name. Let's change the name. Let's change the name to keep selling it to people. Well, they're all one and the same. Yes, you can say they're different and all that. And yet, no, they're not. Socialism leads to communism 99.999% of the time. There's never been a time that it ever hasn't. Progressive is socialism. They're the same. And so what we have to do is start making those, statements and show. You see, Bernie blames the uber rich for all our problems, right?
Of course.
And Hitler blamed the Jews. It's the same tactics being used over and over again. And it's terrifying that someone like him is even at the level that he's at. Now, I see how he can be enticing. There's a lot of things that you're like, yeah, get the bad guy. Woo. I'm all for the, it sounds great. And so it's that piece that people catch on to without seeing the iceberg underneath, so to speak, of what it really does to our culture. And so I see that creeping in, and it literally terrifies me. I have 4 teenage kids and now I don't homeschool them now, but because they're, in older years, and I want them to just really be able to know before going to college what they're faced with. But basically, they come home with these liberal ideas. Well, everybody hates President Trump. Well, why? I don't know. We just do. Why? Because he's a racist. Is he? What did he say? I don't know. Everybody says he's a racist. So these are the kinds of mentality that are creeping in. And it's brainwashing techniques. And it's brainwashing techniques into communism. And people don't get it. And so you get this communist slant on all these television shows, on commercials even. And so your mind is under attack like I've never seen before. And I think that's one of the things that gets overlooked is the power of television, the power of radio, the power of magazines, TVs, all of it. They're processes that have been studied via Project Monarch, MK Ultra. These are real projects studied by the CIA, the FBI, on how to brainwash, how to manipulate, how to get people convinced. They know these tactics and they're using them. And it's actually starting to sway the population. And we can see that with the rise of Bernie Sanders, who we know is a communist.
What, let me ask you this. This is kind of an unfair question. Do you believe that he will be the Democrats' choice platform that they put up? Do you think he's going to win in the Democratic primaries and will be the one that they choose to go against Donald Trump? If not him, who? I
have no idea. I hate them all. So I have no idea. It's just, I asked myself that question, and I figured Bernie would kind of start rising the way he did because he was rising the last time. He ran, but the Democrats shut him down. Like his own party shut him down.
Yeah, and
so we're starting to see that again already. They're starting to make their cliche Russia's hacking for Bernie and President Trump. I'm like, really? Come on. What about China, Saudi Arabia, Israel? They're all doing the same. Like every country under the sun does that. Right. And we actually did it. We did it to Israel. We did it in other countries.
We're guilty as charged, U.S. Right.
Right. So I'm like, okay, so all of them do it. So, but they don't say anything about who they're supporting. In reality, Russia has actually been supporting Hillary, when she was the one getting the help. That's how they interfered. Everything that they found, those 12 Russians or whatever it was on Facebook, it was in support of Hillary. And I'm like, okay, good grief. But it's just these lies that they're concocting right now. So I don't know. I'm not even going to answer that one.
I told you it was an unfair question. So I'm not going to put you on the spot with that. It is an unfair question.
Maybe as we get closer, I mean, you've got your top 4, I guess. I don't even know, because you got Buttigieg and Bernie. Buttigieg has risen a little more than I thought. Bloomberg, I don't think will get there, but I mean, unless he brings on Hillary, I don't know. That's been off and on talk, rumors, I guess. And then, I think, Joe is a possibility, but everybody, I mean, he's so involved in the Ukraine scandal. I don't even know if he has a shot anymore. So
Yeah,
I hope
I
none
don't.
of them have a
think
shot against President Trump. I'll say Trump will win.
right, right. I know. I agree with a lot of people in that. There's a lot
Okay,
of
who do
things to
you
be.
think? I'm going to throw it back in your court.
Well, I actually think that I don't think that they have a star in the wings
No.
that would have enough momentum, star power. We know Trump took really not just the nation by surprise, but he first took the Republicans by surprise within their camp of the popularity that he gained and the traction that he gained so quickly in their own party. They were shocked. They were shocked that he quickly rose to the forefront. They were shocked at how well he did in the debates. And they were just as shocked as everybody else that they couldn't deny that he had to be their candidate to put forth. And then they were shocked again when he actually won, like the rest of the nation, I think, that he won the presidency. Yes, far from perfect. Yes, he has a lot of things to dislike and be actually as a Christian and believer say, you know what, this was just absolutely outright wrong. But you look at all the pressure and all that he has had to face from day one of his presidency and all that has been accomplished. I challenge people this, Lisa. I go to the US Gov's website and you look at the laws that have actually been passed over the last 3 years while all this other junk has been going on. And I think you will actually be really, really amazed at the number of things that he has put into place, laws that have passed that have been pro-family. Number one is his pro-family stance. We have not had, since JFK, I don't think, anybody as strongly pro-family as he has been. I just was talking with in another interview that he had just recently put together a 12-panel person mixed of theologians and physicians that is actually an ethics committee on stem cell research, meaning that the government is going to, under him, is going to pull out any funding that does not pass their ethics bar when it comes to stem cell research in aborted fetus cells. If it doesn't pass their muster with aborted fetal cells, then those programs, those corporations, those companies are going to have their funding pulled like that under him. That's one thing. The other thing that I've seen under him also is you can't even compare the numbers of the arrests and convictions that are being made under the sex trafficking laws that are actually already in place and have been in place for a long time. Those have almost tripled compared to what they were during the 8 year. In the first 3 years, they have tripled the number of convictions under 8 years of Obama, in the number of convictions and people that are being taken off the streets and rescues that are occurring throughout the country through his programs. When I see those things and that he is against abortion, that he's rallying people, local governors in their own states to be more bold, and they're saying, we're not going to fund these things anymore in our states. They're increasing, the terms, the amount of time, saying no, after so long in our state anyway, that you can't even get an abortion here, places like Kentucky, and others. It's like, how can you, all that you don't like about Trump, you don't like the way he uses Twitter, you don't like his voice, you don't like the way he talks, the things he says just irritate you. So what? So what? Look at what is being done and being accomplished. And I'm saying that versus a party of death, how can you not want this guy to continue? How can you, he's going to continue being attacked, but he's withstood it too with an amazing resolve. I think a lot of people, other men and women who might have, men or women who might have been in the position that he has been, would have cracked underneath the pressure that has been placed upon him long ago. I think it had it not been for his business background in facing tough scenarios with his own business dealings, where he's dealt with unscrupulous men and women and companies who have attacked him, tried to undermine him, tried to steal from him, whatever. I think that experience has paid him so many dividends in being able to weather the storm. I don't know that I could have handled the criticism, the attacks, the verbal assault that has come at him from every direction, and been able to withstand it. So my hope is that he would continue another 4 years. I think because of him, as in the scripture says, is God who places the men and women in the places of authority, that we get as people, the men and women in authority that we deserve. So I think we fully deserve the people that are in power today, because that's what the scripture says, that the Father places them there. I'm praying that we get another 4-year reprieve. I hope for that. And I think that would be him. So my hope is that he would win again. But on that same token, for me, I am not the least bit naive to think that the enemies of him and us as believers are not trying to uncover, pull every string, every dirty trick, everything that they can muster or put strength behind to try to make sure that happens. The globalists, the technocrats, those on the world stage, they say the only nation standing in their way to get what they are accomplishing is, in fact, the United States. That if they can get the United States to crumble, then they have a smooth, paved way to make everything happen that they want to happen for their global governance initiatives, be it the climate accords that he pulled us out of. One of the first things he did within first couple of weeks, one of the first things he did is he pulled us out of the climate accords that were taking place in France, which would have further destroyed our economy. Not that we haven't suffered under NAFTA and GATT and all those other things that have caused the economy to all the jobs to flee overseas. What has Trump done? He's been making deals not through treaties like NAFTA and GATT, but one-on-one individually with companies saying, hey, bring your employees back. We'll give you a tax break, and of course the Democrats say, oh yeah, he's just giving more to the rich. It's like, folks, those people coming back are giving us jobs. So what's not to like about that? Anyway, so I that's my hope, whether or not that it can be pulled off, or whether or not the dirty tricks are going to be too much to overcome. I'm like you, come November, it's going to be very, very interesting to see all that transpires between the time of this recording or release of this recording and the elections taking place. I think it's going to be very volatile. Let's put it this way. I don't think we have many calm days in between now and then.
Oh, I agree. 100%. And I'm rooting for President Trump. And, I think I'm hoping for 4 more years of a reprieve, and I'm doing everything I can to help him this coming election year. So I'm with you.
Okay, that's good. Well, Lisa, this has been very fun, and I'm sure there's a lot more that we can talk about, but we've run out of time. We've been talking for about 57 minutes now. Hard to believe. But I'm just going to encourage everybody again. First, go to the Daily Renegade. Help our brother and sister. The scriptures say very clearly, they will know you are mine by your love for one another. By your love for one another. Let us show our love and support for Josh and Christina during a difficult time for them. Many of you, there's not a family that's not been touched by cancer. But I have 5 children. Lisa, you mentioned that you have 4. I have 5. And I've faced financial difficulty, both just natural through government trying to take everything that I own, and medical bills, and what seems to be unsurmountable medical bills. And I know, because I worked in that field, I mixed chemo in a hospital for 9 years as part of professionally. That's what I did. I compounded chemotherapy drugs. I know how much they cost. I know what insurances end up paying. And let me tell you, they have caps. They pay so much and then they stop. You are left to be responsible for everything else. And that cap is reached very, very quickly. So let's do that and help them. I advise you to go to that website on your screen, bookmark it, know where it's at. If you want the latest news that's been researched, vetted, go to that website. Yeah, you're going to get good information. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on. I'm glad I got to know you through our mutual friend, Josh, and I'm sure this won't be the last time that I have you on Disputed Lands, and I look forward to talking to you in the future and seeing you around. Everybody be in prayer for her. She's doing a tough job trying to dig through all that, and as we know through our discussions, by her boldness, she puts a target on her back, folks. We must surround our brothers and sisters in prayer, show our support, be there for them, do all that we can to help one another, because the bottom line is it's you and I who have each other's backs. That's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. Well, we love you. Thanks again for joining us, Lisa. We'll have you on again. This is Chad. This is Chad Schaefer. This is Disputed Lands. This is Take on the World TV. Until we see you again, probably the next hour. Stay tuned.
Thanks.
Get right, get inside, get hungry, word of God appetite. Everlasting water, never again thirsty. To disputed lands, take a journey. Get right, get inside, get hungry, word of God appetite. Everlasting water, never again thirsty. To disputed lands, take a journey. Get right, get inside, get hungry, word of God appetite.